The new batch, 1934 World Cup, Austria. Austria competed at their very first World Cup in 1934, being one of 10 nations making their debut in this World Cup. Unlike the prior World Cup in 1930, this was a shorter trip for them since Austria happened to share a border with Italy. Since the World Cup in 1934 was hosted by Italy, by a European nation, more nations from Europe did compete at this World Cup. A total of 12 nations from Europe competed at this World Cup. Unlike the 1930 World Cup, where all the nations that competed was invited, this World Cup with more nations being interested, to narrow it down that the best nations do compete at this World Cup, there was a qualifying stage. Since 1934, every World Cup since has had a qualifying stage. Just like all the other groups, Austria was put in a group with nations that are near to them. They happen to be in a group with Bulgaria and Hungary. Austria and Hungary once shared an empire. In this group, the top two teams would qualify for the World Cup. All nations will have to play each other both home and away. Though a total of 6 matches was going to be played, half of those matches took place, and Austria only had to play one game. Their one and only game in this group was against Bulgaria at home in the Prater Stadion in Vienna, Austria's capital. Stadium now known as the Ernst Happel Stadion. It now holds over double the capacity it did back in 1934. A first half hat-trick from Johann Hofrath gave Austria a great start for their first World Cup qualifying campaign. He became Austria's very first player to score a World Cup qualifying goal and a World Cup qualifying hat-trick. He's also the first player to ever score a hat-trick in the first half during a World Cup qualifying match. Austria will go on to score a further 3 goals in this game. Karl Zizek would score in the 59th minute, making it 4-1 for Austria. Rudolf Vertel would also score in this game and make it 5 for Austria. Bulgaria do get a goal back though. Lozanov in the 66th minute, but just 1 minute later, Matthias Sindelar made it 6-1 for Austria over Bulgaria. With this win, it put Austria in a good position. Bulgaria go on to lose their next game against Hungary, and then they withdraw. And with that withdrawal, both Austria and Hungary qualify for the World Cup, for their first World Cup, both of those nations. Again, because of Bulgaria withdrawing, Austria and Hungary didn't have to play each other, so Austria just needed to play one game during the qualifiers. Alright, so that's how Austria qualified for the World Cup. Now you see how they got on. They were one of the nations that were ranked, so one of the higher ranked nations, which meant that they would play a nation that wasn't ranked. That nation they came up against was France. Unlike the previous World Cup, where 2 games took place simultaneously for the opener, all 8 games took place at the same time. And unlike the previous World Cup, this competition had no group stages. It was a straight knockout competition. So a nation can't afford to lose a game. And I should mention, for France, this will be the second time that they would open a World Cup game. But unlike the last World Cup for them, they actually lost this game to Austria 3-2. But this game went into extra time, this being the very first match at the World Cup where a match went to extra time. The stadium that this match took place in was the Stadio Olimpico Gran Torino. Originally, the stadium was named after Benito Mussolini back in 1934, where this match did take place. The new name, as I mentioned, the Stadio Olimpico Gran Torino, is named after the Gran Torino team who sadly passed away in 1949. So, in this match, the very first encounter between Austria and France at the World Cup, France took the lead in the 18th minute. Gian Nicholas scored, but in the 44th minute, Sindela, who did score in the qualifying round, becomes the very first player to ever score for Austria at a World Cup. So that's 1-1 in the first half. No goals were scored in the second half, which made this game go into extra time. And as I've mentioned earlier, this would be the very first tie to go into extra time. So 3 minutes into extra time, Anton's goal for Austria gave Austria the lead. That's 2-1. And then Bican, that's Joseph Bican, scored in the 109th minute. 3-1 now to Austria. France do get a penalty. Georges Verriès for France does score his penalty, 3-2, but nothing more than a consolation. Austria go through to the quarterfinals, and for France knocked out at the first hurdle again. Okay, and in the quarterfinals, Austria do meet their neighbour, that is Hungary. As mentioned, they shared an empire with each other one time, and during this World Cup qualifying campaign, they were in the same group, though they did not play each other. So technically, this could have been the first time that two nations who played each other at the during qualifiers would meet again at the World Cup. So it's a technicality, yes or no. Austria do win this game as well. They beat Hungary 2-1 in the Stadio Renato di Lara, where Bologna played their home games in. The stadium's name during the World Cup in 1934 was called the Stadio Littoriale. Johann Hofrath, who scored a hat-trick during qualifiers, opened up the scoring for Austria in this game, 1-0 over Hungary. And Karl Zizek, who also scored during the qualifiers against Bulgaria, made it 2-0 for Austria over Hungary. 9 minutes later, Hungary does get a penalty. Sorosi scores the penalty, 2-1. Hungary does get a goal back. However, Emery Marcos got sent off. That was the only sending off at this tournament. So definitely set Hungary back there. But for Austria, they held on 2-1. They qualify for their first ever World Cup semi-final. They took on the hosts, Italy. This match took place in the San Siro, Milan, where both Inter and AC Milan play their home games in. This is where Austria's journey ended. They lost 1-0 to Italy thanks to a goal from Enrique Gaeta, who scored in the 19th minute for Italy, which did knock Austria out of the World Cup. Austria will then play Germany in the very first ever third place playoff. This World Cup will be the first World Cup to have this match, and every World Cup since has had a third place playoff. Other than one exception, that would be the 1950 World Cup, where the match between Sweden and Spain could technically be known as a third place playoff. But just like there wasn't a final at that World Cup, in theory, there wasn't a third place playoff either. Anyway, Austria would go on to lose this match as well. They were defeated 3-2 by Germany in the Giorgio Ascari Stadium. This is the one stadium that is no longer standing. It was destroyed during World War II. Most of the goals in this game were scored in the first half, Germany scoring 3 of those goals, Lino getting 2 in the first and 42nd minute, as well as Conan, who scored in the 27th minute. Horvath, who scored a hat-trick in qualifiers and did get a goal in the quarterfinals against Hungary, did pull a goal back for Austria, and Karl Sesta did make it 3-2 at the end, but nothing more than a consolation. Austria finishes 4th at this World Cup. The 1934 World Cup for Austria was a fantastic showing for them. Great. Their first World Cup, managing to reach the semi-finals, finishing 4th in total. Great for them. Again, they got knocked out by Italy, who were the hosts of that tournament, who did end up winning it themselves. So, regardless, no shame for Austria at this World Cup. They do go on to miss out on the next World Cup in 1938 because of issues with Germany, taking, I believe, quite a few of their players, trying to unify Austria with Germany. Again, that's got some stuff to do with the war as well, I believe. So yeah, they actually end up boycotting that World Cup or withdrawing in total. They don't compete at the World Cup again till 1954 after World War II, and the 1954 World Cup will be the first World Cup to be hosted in Europe after World War II. Austria compete at that one, and they do one better. Again, they still reach the semi-finals, but they win their playoff match against Uruguay. And to this day, that 1954 Austria team are the most successful Austria team at the World Cup. They haven't qualified for a World Cup since 1998 in France. As of now, 2026 World Cup qualifiers, they're currently second in their group, having played one less game than all the other teams in their group. Anyway, that's Austria at the 1934 World Cup, new batch. I think this is on record as my longest video for this series, but anyway, thanks for watching, listening. I appreciate it as usual. I hope you enjoyed all this minutes of this video, or at least most of it. Anyway, thanks for watching, listening. I appreciate it as usual, and bye.